Okay. And they're all being admitted. All right, everybody's coming in. Just give us a minute to let everyone get into the room. And appreciate your patience as we all are dealing with overloaded internets and crashes and things like that. So welcome everyone to another one of the Maryland Online webinar series. We are very privileged to have representation from Most Commons today, something that I think is going to be helpful to everyone. As you can see, you're all muted as you come in. Please stay muted if you can, and put your questions into the chat box, and we'll try to get to them throughout the presentation. The webinar today is Resources to Support Remote Teaching and Learning Using the Most Commons. I'm going to introduce the moderator, Annika, who is the co-founder and principal of edBridge Partners. Thank you all for coming, and I will let Annika take over from here.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So we're really pleased to present to you today on the Most Commons. We are going to have our Most Commons Fellow, Colleen McKnight, walk you through the Commons and give you a sense of all the things that you can do on there and to support your remote and online teaching. We're also joined today by Dr. M.J. Bishop, who is the director of the USM Kerwin Center, who sponsors, as a co-sponsor of the MOST initiative, which is our Maryland open source textbook initiative. And we're here to answer any questions you might have more broadly about MOST, but we'll focus on the Commons to start. Colleen?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the being a little patient as my internet decided to give out right before this started, because of course that's what's going to happen. My name's Colleen McKnight. I'm actually the Director of Library Services at Frederick Community College, but this is also my second year as the MOST Library Fellow, which is helping the Most Commons sort of curate materials and help connect institutions and faculty to the resources that are available at the Most Commons. And I'm actually going to start just by sharing a little bit of a presentation to start. So just a very quick background about the MOST initiative. It is led by the University System of Maryland's William E. Kerwin Center for Academic Innovation, and it's a partnership with Maryland Online, the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and the Maryland Independent College and University Association. And a lot of you have probably been connected with the MOST initiative in some way, mostly with the MOST grants. The purpose of it is to support the long-term statewide scaling and sustainability of fully accessible, openly licensed course materials by providing the infrastructure Maryland's public higher education institutions need to collaborate and co-create OERs. And those supports are mostly through the MOST grants and the MOST Commons. And the MOST Commons was something that was put into place because there was obviously a need for a site where Maryland institutions could collaborate around OER and where they could also share and find OERs that were specific to Maryland. And that is how the MOST Commons came to be. It was officially launched in spring 2019, so it actually has not been active for that long yet. And it is an online space to help you find, share, and collaborate around OERs. So that is the main purpose of the MOST Commons. Now, we were going along just swimmingly, getting institutions connected, having them start to use the Commons, when of course COVID-19 hit. And that made everything just more important about what the MOST Commons can do. Immediately, faculty were asked to be more flexible with their learning modes. They needed to be able to quickly move to remote digital learning. This just isn't true from what happened in spring of 2020, but is true now as well. Because I know a lot of colleges are doing hybrid learning in some form. And we really thought that OERs, at most, that OERs could help with these transitions, but we weren't completely sure. So in spring of 2020, MOST actually sent a survey out to faculty to find out, our two Maryland online institutions, to find out if they did find having OERs available help them when this very quick remote transition happened. And I do want to share a little bit of the survey results with you today, though you also will be getting the full results. Those are going to be emailed out to, I believe, the MOST email list, the full report of these. So this is just a little preview of what we found out. So it was sent right after the spring 2020 semester to over 2,000 faculty on the MOST mailing list. We got 251 total responses, which represented 27 Maryland institutions. And 98% of those survey respondents had taught a course during the spring 2020 semester, which is great. 41% of the respondents had used an OER or were using an OER in spring 2020. 55% were not using or had not used an OER. So here's a little bit of what we found out. We did separate out, so we asked them, did you use one, did you not? And then it separated the questions out. So the first question that we asked was asking if incorporating OER made it easier for their students to access the materials during the shutdown. And luckily, yes, most respondents did say that it did, close to 83 of them, which is great. This really, the ones who said no it was more related to the Wi-Fi and internet access that student had, since a lot of the OERs were online. So that was the main reason that faculty said that it did not help their students access these resources. The second question we asked was, they think incorporating OER into their course mode made it easier for the transition to remote teaching for themselves? And you'll see that's a little bit less. Only 63 said yes, still a majority, but 40 said no. And we think that that probably makes sense. There was nothing easy about what happened in spring of 2020, no matter what kind of resource that you were using. But most did find it a little bit more helpful. One respondent said it wasn't necessarily that it made it easier, but it did make it smoother. Students were used to using that type of resource, so when that shift happened, it wasn't such a shock to those students, but nothing about it was necessarily easy. One other respondent actually mentioned that because the shift happened so abruptly, there were activities and assignments that he could no longer do. So he actually turned to OERs to try and fill in those gaps a little bit. And because he was used to using OERs, it made it easier for him to go and find other resources, which we thought was a really interesting point. Now, for those who were not currently using OER, we asked them if they thought it might have helped them. So we asked, do you think it may have made it easier for students to access instructional materials? And you'll see that the majority were not sure, which makes sense. You can't know if something was going to work for you if you weren't actually using it. But we were really happy to see that most were either yes or not sure, which means they either thought it would have helped or they weren't quite sure, but they certainly weren't closed off to the idea that it helped. For the ones who said no, a lot of the questions were around, they didn't have access, again, the internet issue, so they didn't think it would have actually made it easier for students. And of course, the question, do you think it would have made it easier for you to transition? You see there are a few more no's, but still a majority said yes or not sure. And the main reasons they weren't sure if it was going to be easier were kind of the same things that we often hear from faculty, which is they didn't know how to find OERs that they want to use, and they weren't sure about the quality of those OERs. And this is something that MOST Commons was built to help, both to help faculty discover those relevant OERs, as well as to help determine if the quality of those OERs are something you would want to bring into your course. So I'm going to stop sharing this at the moment. And are there any questions just around the survey at all? That was just a quick little preview of what it is that went out just at the end of spring. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share again, because now we're going to go ahead and go into the actual commons itself. So hold on one moment. Okay, so where you are right now is the M.O.S.T Commons, most.oercommons.org, that is the URL. And if you've never seen the M.O.S.T Commons before, let me just show you a couple of things. You're gonna see some menu items up here. You're gonna see a big search box right here, as well as some information about discovering and collaborating. I do wanna point out the sign in and register. For the sign in and register, what you are going to, anyone who is has a Maryland institutional email can register for the M.O.S.T Commons. So you do need to use your institutional email to do so. It's a very simple registration. You just fill out your first name, your last name, institutional email, password, and you're in. You do not have to register to actually search for resources, but there are a lot of features that I'm going to show you that you can only do if you are a registered member. Registration is completely free. It's very easy to do. So within this M.O.S.T Commons, let's just start with searching. It is the main thing that you're probably going to come here for, is to try to find OERs that are helpful for your course. So it's a very simple search. I'm actually gonna look for some management resources. So I'm gonna hit management. You can do subject and education level drop downs right off the bat, but I'm gonna wait to do that. And I'm gonna hit search. So now you can see all of my search results, about 409, and all of these ways that I can actually filter my search. So I can start to narrow down what it is that I'm looking for. And I'm thinking that I am teaching a 100 level management course. So I'm going to click on this education level because this is going to help me narrow down to just those resources that are meant for those levels. You'll notice the community college lower division, that means 100, 200 level. College upper division means really 300 level and above. And you have graduate, professional, career, technical, and adult education. Everything in the M.O.S.T Commons is meant to support higher education, so you are not going to find K through 12 resources in here, unless those K through 12 resources are in here because we have teaching programs that want to be able to access those resources. So I'm going to click Community College Lower Division. Now I'm down to 187, and you'll see a bunch of these other types of filters as well. Some of these are probably going to be more helpful for you than others. I want to point out material type, because a lot of times we get to the question that, you know, there's only books or they don't have as many materials as OER, and there's actually lots and lots of different types of materials that are OER, and so material type helps to narrow that down. I'm always going to recommend that you may want to choose full course, because what full course does is you may find a course that pulls all of these elements together, rather than having to search through all of these different ones. So I'm gonna do full course. And then I also want to point out the media format, because it's not just necessarily ebooks that are available in OER. You have lots and lots of different types of media that is available. And since I know I'm gonna be teaching my class online, I want some video content, so I'm gonna choose video. So now I've only got about 39, which is pretty good. And I actually want to go ahead and limit it to the subject area as well. We've got some higher level subject areas that you'll see here, but each of these also has some secondary subject levels to help kind of help you narrow down even more what it is you're looking for. So I'm going to click on business and finance, and you'll notice there's accounting, finance, and management. And of course, management is what I'm interested in. So I'm going to click on that, and now I've only got 6 resources, which is pretty good for me to take a look through. There are a couple of things that I want to point out. If you have looked at M.O.S.T Commons before, there's actually a new feature, which is related to how licensing is displayed. Before, it was very hard to figure out what it was or how a resource was licensed until you really got into the resource to look at it. Now it is very easily labeled here, and you'll notice this little information. It tells you right off the bat what it is that you can do with this resource. So this can be a really helpful way as you're looking through, because you can only look at those resources that have the license that you want. You'll notice if you ever see a read the fine print, that means that that resource does not have a normal Creative Commons open license, you really need to go in and check to see what it is that you can do with that resource. We do have a couple of resources on here that are considered free resources, so you can use them, but they are not open, which means they are copyrighted, so you wouldn't be able to make changes to those resources, or you should really be linking directly to them. You shouldn't be pulling the content from those resources into your course. So if you ever see one of these, really pay attention to what you can do with that resource when you get into it. You'll notice most of these are CC BY, that is your most open license, but then there are a couple that again show you what it is that you are able to do with the resource. So that is a new feature that we're really happy with. And I noticed this one, Principles of Management, and I see that it is an OpenStax. So I know OpenStax is good, so that is what I want to use. And I do want to point out down here, you look at the providers, and we get asked this a lot. Can you search by providers? I'm going to show you a way to browse by providers, but if you click on this, you're going to notice it does not list all the providers because there are often so many, it becomes a little unwieldy. But if I'm in here and I search for OpenStax, you're going to see nothing comes up, which is kind of crazy because I see them right here. But you'll notice that the provider for OpenStax is actually Rice University. OpenStax itself is not a provider. So in order to do OpenStax, you actually have to do Rice University, and that is going to bring you back your OpenStax materials. We know this is a problem because no one thinks of OpenStax as Rice University. So I have another way for you to kind of pull that OpenStax resources together as well. I just wanted to point out the providers issue right here. So let me go ahead and go into Principles of Management. And where you're going to be first is the record. So this is actually not the resource itself, but the record of the resource. And it just gives you some of the basic information that you need. You can even see more of the material types that are related to this, when it was added, Creative Commons license, media formats, and even tags that have been connected to it. You might also notice over here this lovely little endorsement, and I'll talk about endorsements a little bit more in just a moment, but just so you are aware, one of the things that we are doing in the M.O.S.T Commons is if content is being used actively at one of the colleges in Maryland, you can add an endorsement to it to say, yes, we are currently using this resource. So Hagerstown has added this endorsement, which means that you know, all right, Hagerstown is currently using this. Again, I'll talk more about endorsements and what's happening with them a little bit later, but this is something that we are actively working on to make happen. We also think this is a way for you to know if a resource really is a quality resource or not, because if another institution is using that resource, then you know that it must have merit because they are using it in their courses. Now I'm going to hit the View Resources. So what I'm looking at right now is actually still within M.O.S.T Commons, but this is a live instance of the Principles of Management book from OpenStax. But being within the Commons still, what it allows me to do is to do a bunch of different things. And the only reason I see this is because I am signed in as a user at M.O.S.T Commons. If you just want the actual link to the resource, you want to grab this. This is the real link to the resource. If you use this link, again, it's going to show you this in-between, sort of half in the M.O.S.T Commons, half looking at Principles of Management. One of the things to know is not every resource does this, but it will tell you if it's moving you out of the M.O.S.T Commons when you click on a link. But one of the really great things about this is really going to allow you to save and curate resources that you were looking for that you think are really good. You'll also notice you can add ratings to it. You can actually comment on the resource. And you'll notice this evaluate tag. I'll talk about evaluations when I go back to the resource. We aren't currently using these, but it is something that we are actively looking at, again, to help faculty determine quality when they are looking at OERs. So you'll notice the save right here. And when I hit save, you're going to see my groups and all of these other items. But you also notice this my items. And this is something that I can start to add things to my item right now. So I'm going to create a new folder. And you do need to create a folder if you want to add anything to your items, but it's very easy. I'm going to have this folder in my items. I'm going to say management resources. I'm going to create it and save it. It has just saved it to my items underneath that. And now when I go back to the most commons and I click on my little avatar, you're going to see the My Items section, and it exists in there under those folders. So this is something that can be very easy for you to start to go through and pull together the items that you are looking at. You'll also notice when I talk about adding resources, I've got a couple of unavailables in this draft, and I'll talk a little bit about what these are when I get to sharing different resources. But that is a very quick way for you to start to curate things if you don't have time to look through and find the resources that you want or to evaluate them. You can quickly save them and then go back to them at a later time. I'm going to go back real quick to my management resource. Because I do want to point out a couple of things to you within the resource itself, because we often get questions about this as well. So one of the things that many of the faculty mentioned in the survey was the idea that because most of their OERs were online, there was no way for students to access them if students did not have access to reliable internet. But one of the beautiful things about OERs is that you actually have a lot more flexibility in what you can do with that OER, even if it is mostly online. So for instance, with OpenStax, you can download a PDF. They actually even have an option to download it for Kindle, if you have a Kindle at all. And this would have meant that, and you don't have to worry about rights, because that's the issue with most textbook publisher content, is that there are copyright issues for why you can't go through and scan that entire textbook and put it up in your course. But there would be nothing for that with an OER textbook. As long as you had a physical copy, you could get that copy wherever you wanted to. And there are ways to do that. So that is one thing that I do want to point out. A lot of times a resource, you can get physical copies for it, and it's going to be much cheaper and much easier because those resources don't have copyright restricting what you can do. You'll also notice that there are lots of instructor resources. So for OpenStax, one of the reasons OpenStax is so popular is they really do pull together a lot of resources. You've got a test bank here. You've got some video guides. You've got guided lecture notes. I'm not signed in, so I can't actually look at these things, but you can create an account in OpenStax and take a look at them. And then again, here are my videos that they've pulled together for this business series that would have been pulled into my course. Again, this is something you would have to log in to actually see. But there is a lot more to OERs than just the textbook. There are a lot of providers and resources creating lots of that ancillary material that we know that faculty want and like to use. So I'm going to go back to the most commons again and just see, I saw there were a couple of questions that kind of popped up in chat to see if I can answer any questions that have come up so far. Any questions at all? Wendy?
Colleen, we just had one question about how to search for things that are being used in Maryland, which I think you're going to get to when you get to endorsements and collection.
I am, yes. So the other way to really look for what is being used in Maryland is not necessarily by searching. It's going to be by browsing, and that is the Discover that's right up here. And you'll notice that there is a resources and collections and providers. If you go to the resources for discovery, this just gives you subject areas, material types, basically the same big browsing or the big limiters that I showed you before. You can start to browse down by that. But the really big one is the collections. And when I click on this, you're going to see all of these collections from all these different institutions. And this is what is happening when an endorsement is added to a resource. It automatically starts a collection for those, for that institution and pulls all those resources together. You're going to see right now that Warwick is actually ahead with adding endorsements to things, and Hagerstown is very closely behind. But we have them for a couple of institutions right now. You'll also notice that we do have it for the Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative. These are resources, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this, that have been created using M.O.S.T grants. So you can see what has been, what M.O.S.T has helped support in Maryland. So here you'll see, here's everything that was created using a M.O.S.T grant. Now, this is the best way to do it right now, which is just going directly to that institution and taking a look. If you are searching for something, let me go into anatomy and physiology, and you saw an endorsement over here, you can click on that endorsement and it will bring you right back to the page that shows you everything that is being used at that specific college. Then you can filter down by subject area, educational level, material type, providers, and all of that. So that is the main way that you're going to be able to see what is being used at the different institutions. More than one college can add an endorsement to a resource. So if you go to that resource, you'd be able to see every college that was using that resource at that time, and then click on that college name and see all of the resources they are using. This is something that we started this past winter. So it's really only started to gain speed in the last couple of months. Whenever I see a resource that comes in, so one of my jobs is to approve resources that are coming in. If I see a resource coming in, especially if I know it's from Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative grant, I know that that resource is most likely being used at that college, so I will go ahead and add the endorsement to it. Most of these endorsements have been created by what we call resource administrators that have been identified at each of these colleges. So they're in charge of approving content that comes in from their college and adding these endorsements on. This is something that we want to expand. So if you are one of those people who, normally it's been librarians or in online learning, who is sort of at the forefront of their institution's OER initiatives, you would be somebody who may want to be a resource administrator. You can just reach out to us at M.O.S.T and we'll talk to you about it. I'll get into hubs as well. Usually a hub is kind of connected with a resource administrator, but this is one of the main ways we are trying to identify what resources are being used in Maryland and let other people know what resources are being used. So this is one of the big new things that is just started at M.O.S.T over the last couple of months, and we're really excited about it. We think it's going to be a very helpful feature for all of you. You'll also notice that we do have a couple of other collections, so we're always looking at adding collections that we think will be helpful. These were actually 6 collections that were added right when the shutdown happened, because we knew that faculty were really looking for those video audio lectures as well as science labs and activities. And if ever you have an idea for a collection or things that you were looking for and you think it would be a good idea for us to add them to the Most Commons, you just again have to reach out to us and we would be able to do that. So collections are a really good resource for you as you are trying to find different things. I also mentioned providers, that you can search by provider, so you can drill down and see all the different providers that are on the Most Commons. Not all of them are necessarily listed here. They have to reach a certain threshold of a number of OERs that they have. But for instance, the Saylor Foundation, they've been around for a long time. There's a lot of, they have a lot of resources on the Most Commons. And then again, you can filter down as you go through. So those are our collections, and especially our institutional collections, which we're really excited about. Are there any questions around those at all?
No questions right now.
Great. All right. I do want to point out a couple of new resources that we just recently got, just so that you are aware of them. I'm actually pretty excited. University of Baltimore, they just added 2 new resources, the first year seminar academic success guide and an information literacy book. And what these are OERs that have been created by M.O.S.T grants, I believe, and they are in press books. So this is content that has actually been created by people in Maryland. And most of the M.O.S.T textbook initiatives, there's been some kind of change, or it's been actually created by faculty or institutions in Maryland. So this is one way to kind of take a look to see not just what is being used, but what is being created a little bit. Let's see. The other resources that we are constantly adding resources as we go through, the other really great partnership that we just started talking to about, and we're hoping to add more of those resources very soon, is the National Humanities Center has reached out to us. They have a lot of open resources, and we know that there is, we don't have a lot of humanities resources right now in the M.O.S.T Commons, so we'll be adding those in as we go through. So we're excited about that as well. And what we would have is they would either become a provider or we'd make a collection of their resources, so it'd be very easy for you to find the resources that you need once those were put up. Any other questions at all? Because I'm about to move on to sharing OERs and what you can do to share anything. Okay.
No questions right now.
All right, thanks, Annika. All right, so the second thing that we really built the M.O.S.T Commons for was so faculty and other institutions could begin to share the OERs that they are using or OERs that they have found. And that comes to the Add OER button. So there are 2 ways that you can add an OER. One is simply submitting that OER from the web. It does go through a review process. If you are a resource administrator and it's coming from your institution, you would be the person who can review that. If your institution does not have a resource administrator, then it comes to me and I'm the one who reviews it. You also can actually create resources directly on the M.O.S.T Commons using OpenAuthor, which I'll demo a little bit as well. So for submitting a link from the web, it's a very simple form. I'm going to grab a link that I've got. And one nice thing about it is that if that link already exists, you will not be able to add it. It will simply say this already exists. And you could go in and actually search for it. If it's an OER you're using and you have endorsement privileges, you can actually endorse that resource, but you know that it is actually here. So the Small Business Administration actually has a really good Write Your Business Plan information. So I'm going to submit that resource. When you submit it, if there is content that they can pull directly from the website, the system will do that. Otherwise, you'll have to start to add things in. So you want to add title, the description, any authors that might be there, the conditions of use. And one of the main things that I'm looking at when I am sort of approving these resources is that the condition of use is the correct one. So I'll double check that. Then you have all of these different options for what you can add. There's those subject areas and the material types and the media formats. These are all required. Language is also required. You can have more than just English, though English is the majority of the resources that we have on the site. And then you can start to add some tags as well. And one of the nice things about the tags is that when you start to type in a tag, it actually shows you other tags that exist in other resources. So you can start to add tags that are here all together. And in fact, if you go into a resource and click on a tag, every resource that has that tag will again show up in your search results. That's a really easy way to sort of find other resources that may be relevant to what it is that you've already found. Then you just hit continue, and then what will happen is you will always see it in your My Items. As you will notice here, this is currently unavailable. I either deaccessioned it myself or it is still in pending. You'll notice the little pending here if I have not approved it yet. So you will always be able to see what items you have added, and you will always be able to see, all right, what is happening with that item right now. And it's under your My Items. So that is the easy way to submit from the web. A lot of times I will also look at a resource and I may add another subject heading because I think that might make it more discoverable. I might add a couple more tags because I think that might help other faculty find that resource, or other institutions find that resource a little more. I make almost no changes to description or any of the other main talking points around it, but we do ask if you can try and fill it out as much as you can if you're the person submitting that, just to make it more discoverable for everyone else. So that is how you add something from the web. The other big way to add an OER is with Open Author. Open Author is basically a modular creator. The nice thing about it is free, so anyone can use this. It costs your institution nothing. The kind of downsides of it a little bit are that it is not necessarily the most user-friendly resource to use. So there are other resources out there like Pressbooks and a couple of other ones that are a bit more user-friendly. But this is a way for you to begin to add resources if it's something that is not hosted somewhere else. So we've had a lot of faculty who have their resource, say, as a PDF or a Word document, or even a lot of times faculty just share a Google Drive document. But if you have a Google Drive document, you still need to keep it in your Google Drive. Maybe you don't want to do that anymore. So you want to host it or have it downloaded somewhere else. And this is a place where you can put that. So it's not always tied to, say, your personal Google account. You'll notice that you just enter a resource, you can add an image if you want, and you can create it in sections. So this, you can think of a section as like one module. Then you can actually import information directly from Google Drive if you want. They also can import from OneDrive. It's not a perfect formatting one-to-one, so it does require some formatting work. Or if your resource is in a PDF or some kind of document and you're not going to have time to recreate it here, you can actually attach that. And we have a couple, I'll show you a couple of new resources we have where this is what the faculty member or institution has done. It can be saved, obviously, so you do not have to finish this all at once. It automatically connects you as the author for it, but you can add more authors to it. So this is also a way that you could share resources or talk about resources that you might be creating, both within your institution or across an institution. If it is in draft form, it is not available. After you have filled everything out and saved it, there's a place where it will give you so that you can actually publish that resource. I don't think I can move forward. Yep, I'll have to add some things in where you can actually publish that resource. And at that point, then you fill out the same record you do for submit a link, and it automatically gets published. So if you are creating something in Open Author and you publish it, there actually is no step for us to take a look at that resource. It automatically becomes part of the site. If you are interested to find out what it is that people have actually added directly to the site, so these are the resources, and someone asked, how can you find resources that have been made in Maryland? This might actually be one way to do it, because if it's been created with these Open Author resources, it's almost guaranteed that it was done in Maryland, because only people who have access to the site are from Maryland institutions, and they're the only ones who would be able to create something like this. So I'm going to go back to the search. I'm going to click on the advanced search. And you're going to see right here, the content source, Author 1 and Open Author 2. That is going to pull up only those things that have been created in Open Author. And we've got about 63 things in here. So this is content that has been either uploaded as in an attachment or created in Open Author. So these are a helpful way for you to be able to see at least what has been created. Some of these probably still need to have endorsements connected to them, and that might take a little bit more time, but with those two things together, it can be probably a really powerful way for you to see what is actually being used or created in Maryland. So I'm going to pause for just a second. Are there any questions about adding OERs?
We don't have any questions, but we did have a suggestion to maybe create some short how-to videos that we can share with faculty for a quick refresher if they don't have the time to come to a webinar or sit through a full presentation.
Sure, that is yeah, that's a very good suggestion. Thank you. So if there's no questions about adding, that is the main way to share resources. Now I'm going to sort of move into the different ways that we recommend for greater collaboration around resources. And there are kind of two ways to kind of connect with others and collaborate. That is our groups and our hubs. I'm going to start with groups because groups, anyone can create a group. I'm going to go to see all groups right now. And this is how you can see all the groups that we have. You'll notice you can actually filter the groups by subjects, types, and even grade level. So when you create a group, it actually, you actually add this information to it to make it easier to find the groups that you are interested in. And we actually have quite a few groups right now that exist. Some of these groups are on our institutional sites, our hubs, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. But some of them also have just started. In fact, we have a super new group called the OER Librarian Working Group that literally was started last Friday when one of the OER librarians from Hartford reached out to me asking about if there was a group that existed, and I recommended, no, I don't think there is, but hey, let's make a group on the most commons. And then that can be a really good way to start to collaborate around things. It's really easy to make a group. You just see the create a group here. You can say what the name is, the type, describe it, start it, and you've got a group going. So it really is that easy. And again, anyone who is registered on the Most Common site can actually create a group. I'm going to show a couple of groups that we have that have just started. We've got a psychology group. Let me go find them. That is for, and Annika may, I might ask you to jump in here a little bit. It is faculty across Maryland who are looking specifically at psychology resources. Is that correct, Annika?
That is absolutely correct. So
Okay.
we've funded quite a few mini grants in the subject area or discipline of psychology. So we connected all of those grantees to each other, and some of them are continuing to work on ancillary materials and other items, and wanted to have a place to collaborate.
So let me show you the psychology group. If you are not a member of the group, you're going to notice that you actually have to ask to join a group. You can actually create a group that is just open. Anyone can come in and join it. Most of the time, it requires a group administrator to accept the member of the group, but it's not very hard at all. You'll notice that there are group resources that have been created here. There's places for discussions. You can see who the members are, a little bit of information that's just the kind of about, and then what the most recent activity is. So you'll see with the psychology group, we've started to pull together these resources here. And I can show you, I'm going to go to my institutional test group, how you can make that work. So I am a member of this group. You'll see all of these different resources that are in here. And this is, again, when you are going through and searching for resources and you see the saved materials. So I'm going to go back to my principles of management. So when I'm looking at the resource here and I see the save, you can actually do it, again, directly from the record as well. Here's your save right here. I can actually add this directly to a group. So if I had a management group, I could add it right in there. Maybe I want to actually create a new folder. So I'm creating a new folder within my group. It is going to be part of my institutional test group. I've now saved it. It is in my group. So I can go ahead and go directly to my group and it will show up there. So there's my resource. You'll notice that you can do subfolders. You can do up to one subfolder. So that is also possible to break it down into subfolders. And you can actually move resources between groups. So let's say all these Psych 101 textbooks, I actually want to move them into the other Intro to Psych course resources. So I can select all of those resources. And again, I can move them directly into my one here. You'll notice that it did not rid it of it. So what it does is it simply adds them in, but then I can, if I don't want these here anymore, I can simply delete this folder and it will remove all of them from this folder, but they'll still exist here in this group resource folder. So the main thing that is happening when you are working with these groups is it's simply pulling that record in. So the resource is there. Pardon me while I move my cat. The resource still exists in Most Commons, and you are just linking these resources together into here. So it's really about curating the resources that already exist in Most Common. You'll notice also discussions. So here you go, you have the start new discussion. So there is a way to have discussions around groups within a group. It's very easy to start a discussion. You'll notice that you can also make the discussion private to the group only, or you can have anyone see it. So this is the way that you can make a discussion private. You simply add it in, start that discussion, and now my discussion has started. I can reply to it, so you can write any replies here, and it will just keep track of what discussions that you've had. So this is a really easy way to just kind of start to talk about things around your group. We get asked a lot, can you make folders private? And right now, that is not possible. So any resource that you are putting into here is going to be visible to anyone, and it's going to be visible to anyone on the Most Commons, because if someone searched for it, they'd be able to find it. One thing you can do, however, is if you have a draft resource of an open author content, and I don't think I have any that are listed here right now. Nope, I do. So you see here, these right here, these are drafts. Well, hopefully, maybe you guys can't see these. I am signed in. So if you cannot see them, I'm actually looking at drafts of lessons. And what you're gonna see is anyone who is an author on this lesson could go in and take a look at that resource. So you can share draft things that only people who are authors would be able to see within these groups. Now, you are not automatically an author of a resource if you are part of a group, so you would have to add people on to that resource. And there are ways to do that. And if you're interested in that, we'd be able to show you how to do that. But it would be a way to have a draft OER available for people and still keep it private. It is a common question that we get, so it may be that ISKME, who are the people who create the architecture for Most Commons, will have an option to create a private folder at some point in time, but we don't know if that is possible yet. But that drafting is a way to help you keep things more private, because we know that faculty may want to share some resources that they're not quite ready to fully publish, and that might be a way to do it. The other things that you can know about working within a group is if you need to have a group administrator. It's very easy. They are the ones who anyone can create the resources within the group or even do discussions within a group. But what the group administrator really does is they help add people to the group, and they have a little bit more control over moving things around within a group. So if you are interested in groups and you would like to become a group administrator, we can certainly do some trainings around group administration to show you what you can do and how to work with it. One of the nice things about being a group administrator is you would be able to basically send out invitations to your group as well, which is a good way to recruit members to come into the group. Are there any questions about groups?
Not seeing any questions, Colleen.
Okay, all right. So the final resource and way that we connect are our hubs. And this requires a little bit more. Anybody can start a group. So as an individual faculty member, you want to start a group, you want to recruit some people, you want to start sharing resources, you could do that now. with a hub, or what we're calling an institutional site, that does require a little bit more from your institution. We do have a fair number of institutional sites that have been started, and the purpose of an institutional site is really to help connect people within your institution around OERs. So it is also a way for you to get a better sense of, say, what an institution is doing with OERs if you are not part of that institution. A hub is not private. Anyone can come in and see it. As you are not always going to be a member of that hub, but you can certainly search within that hub. You can see what groups are within that hub. As you can see, Montgomery College has done quite a few groups. And you can create collections within a hub if you are a hub administrator. And what this will do is, hopefully what this is doing is pulling resources together that are more relevant to Montgomery College and creating collections that are relevant specifically to Montgomery College. So this is really meant to help support OER initiatives within your own institution. It is also nice to be able to look through and say, I know this Maryland College Open Pedagogy, they have a lot of resources around it, and here are all of those resources in this group. So it can be an easy way for you to kind of see what other institutions are doing as well. I do want to point out we've actually had quite a few new hubs that have just come online. UMGC has just started their hub. I think they started it, I think we went live maybe last week. So this is pretty new. They have started to kind of pull together, and what they are doing is sharing their actual resources that they use within their institution to help their faculty find OERs and integrate OERs into their resources. You'll also notice that they have an entire accessibility resources as well. So this is content that has been created at UMGC, pretty much around their professional development related to OERs, and you can now find all of that within this UMGC hub. So this is one of those, again, new resources. We're constantly adding new things, and this is one of those new things that has just recently been added. So we're really excited about having UMGC on board and starting to share some of that content. You will notice that one of our subject headings, we don't have a professional development subject heading, but that is also coming. So that will allow you to limit searching to those resources that are used at other colleges to help faculty when creating or integrating OERs into their courses. So that is a subject heading that we hope to have by the end of the month. I see I have about 5 minutes left, and that is sort of the basics of the different things that are available from the M.O.S.T Commons. So I'm going to stop and see if anyone has any questions at all.
There are none in the chat, but some good comments and good sharing in the chat.
Great. So I guess the final word that I'll leave is, if you are interested in any of these types of resources, if you want to know more about being a resource administrator or what your institution has to do to get an institutional site, you just have to reach out to us at M.O.S.T Commons. And I'm pretty sure if I scroll down to here, you will see, do we have our, this is Annika. I think if you go to the About OER Commons, will it actually give the M.O.S.T email address anywhere?
I think we have it's connected to join our mailing list, but
Okay.
MJ just put the email address into the chat. It's most@usmd.edu.
Yep. So
and if you want to get our regular emails, please join the mailing list here. Yep.
So there you go. There is the email that you can go to.
Sorry to interrupt. There was one question. Rick Davis asked if you recommend that we first populate our institutional hub with resources before making it public.
You do not have to do, you should have some resources, and we've actually got an entire project management information that goes through and says, here's what you should have before we actually make it public. You should have some content, but it does not have to be all the content. I can tell you that Hagerstown was one of our early adopters for a hub, and they have been consistently adding content as they've gone through. So I would definitely don't limit yourself if you think it'll take you a long time to add all of your content. A good way is just to get started. And that's really what I recommend for anyone. This resource becomes more powerful the more people who are using it and who are adding things to it. So don't feel like you have to have everything ready to go right off the bat. You can start to add things as you go through. With UMGC, you'll notice that they just have a couple of things up there right now, but they now have that space to really start to grow those resources and what they're going to share, both within their institution and outside the institution.
Thanks. Rick's just noting that he's trying to recruit more folks to join the and administrate the Towson hub, and having a little trouble doing that. So it might help if we just go public and go from there. I think that's a great idea, Rick.
Yes, and I do want to point out that I understand an institutional site and having someone who can administer an entire hub may seem like a little bit more than what you can accomplish right now. And that is why we have the resource administrator available as well, because the resource administration really is going to allow you simply to add endorsements to resources, as well as start to approve content that is coming into your site or into the Most Commons. And you do not need to have an institutional site to start to be a resource administrator. So we do have a couple of different levels to get you started in starting to share some of these at an institutional level.
Well, I want to give Colleen and Annika and maybe MJ the last word, but on behalf of Maryland Online, I want to thank Colleen for another excellent presentation, and Annika as well, and MJ of course, and all of their great work with the Commons. And thank you all for coming. Colleen has generously offered to share slides, and you will be getting information about how to view the recording of this in case you weren't able to stay for the whole thing or make it or want to share it with someone else. So thank you all. And anything else from our wonderful presenters and Commons folks?
Nope. I will just add, thank you, Colleen. And yeah, you know, some of the comments in the chat, I think, are reflective of the way I've viewed this resource as an opportunity for us to do much more sharing across institutions and collaboration. So just have been really excited about the work that Colleen has done to support this. It would not be possible without her, definitely not. And also, as I said earlier in the chat, just keep your contributions coming, and we're eager to continue this collaboration. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.